right, welcome. This is Will of Cardboard Minutes, and today we're going to be looking at our top expansions. So we've each kind of picked our top 5. We don't really know what the others have on our lists. I suspect there'll be at least a couple of crossovers. Pretty sure I know what Fran's top number 1 is.
Oh yeah.
But I'll leave it for him when he gets to it. And we are only counting games that we either own and have played. I know we all have some highly expected expansions that are not in our hands yet.
Yep.
Things are a little behind in Canada. We get games typically, a month or two later than other places. So I know, I'm definitely looking forward to the new Dune Imperium expansion.
Yep.
Is very exciting. I've got pre-ordered, but who knows?
Yeah.
Anything else you guys are looking forward to?
Expedition Leaders for Lost Ruins of Arnak.
Yeah.
I know I'm going to like it. And if we do this list again next year, I'm sure it'll be on my list next year.
Oh yeah, there's definitely those two are high on my list, and there's a couple that are packaged in with Kickstarters, which we won't get into, but there's a few good ones that are upcoming, games that I really enjoy, but we'll keep to the ones that we've played for today.
All right, so I have with me here today Nabil and Farhan. You guys have probably seen them on my channel before, and this will not be the last time you'll see them around. So we're just going to go through and do our 5s and then 4s and so on. And let's begin. Maybe at least at the start, we could also mention a little bit about also what makes a good expansion, or why is it a good expansion. So we'll give you guys some reasons why you might want to buy it. I know there's lots of reasons to get expansions, and there's even probably a lot of reasons to not get expansions.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
And I've definitely turned down expansions before. For different reasons, like it overcomplicates the game, maybe, or it's just unnecessary.
I've definitely bought some expansions and played with it, and I'm like, this is just extra stuff that doesn't really add much.
You didn't need it,
add to my enjoyment of the game. It just adds complexity that doesn't need to be there.
Or it just sits in the box, and you never use it.
I have a ton of those.
I got lots of those. Not on this list.
So yes, these are the ones that we like, we play with, and we highly recommend.
Yeah.
All right, Nabil, why don't you kick us off?
Right. So most of mine are ones that I, given the choice, will never not play with. With a couple exceptions. And the ones that I like they're easy to slot in and play with. They're easy to teach to newcomers of the game, most of them. But they still add a little bit more to the decision space while not making it overly complex, in my opinion. Obviously, that's a subjective statement. But we'll just get right into it here.
I have one that breaks the rule, but...
Well, that's not really a rule. It's just kind of
I'll explain it when I get to it.
So my number 5 is Mage Knight: The Lost Legion. I shied away from playing Mage Knight for many years because of how complex and heavy I was told the game was, and it certainly is. But once I got over that hump, Mage Knight is my number 1 solo game of all time. I love it. It's fantastic.
Yeah, it's very good.
And The Lost Legion, it adds another way to play the game. So if you're playing it solo, you're just trying to, depending on what scenario you do, you're just trying to explore the map and, conquer areas. And the main way to play the game is the conquest mode, where you're trying to find 2 cities and then conquer those 2 cities. But you're not really playing against anybody. You're just playing as a timer, a dummy player, which acts as a timer. In The Lost Legion, you're actually playing against an AI-controlled player. There's this other knight on the map with a mini, and his army that he has with him grows throughout the game. So at the beginning, you're trying to kind of avoid him as he tries to go, beat you, while growing his army until you can kind of build your deck and get some units, and then either, accomplish your goal or go up and fight him. So it adds a little bit more. I just prefer playing against an AI versus kind of beat your own high score sort of solo experience, and then this adds that. So it's very easy to just slot in and play. It doesn't add a whole lot more complexity. That's my number 5.
Yeah, I think my goal for Mage Knight is to eventually get it on the channel and do a playthrough.
I'm happy to teach it.
I'm convinced that it's not as hard as people make it believe.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of referencing how to do certain events kind of thing in the game.
Absolutely. I 100% agree with that.
So I think the actual gameplay, I think we can teach it in not that much time.
Yep.
and then just leave the referencing things to later.
Yeah. And I have the Ultimate Edition of the game. I'm not sure if the original printing has this as well, but the actual core game flow is not that complex.
Right? Yeah, exactly.
But it is just there's lots of different things you can do on the map, each of which has a different has its own set of rules, so to speak. But the game gives you all the reference cards that tells you how to carry out those events when they come up. So you don't need to learn them right away and learn all of them. You just have the reference cards available to you, and when a dungeon comes up, you reference that dungeon card. Or if a ruin comes up, how do I interact with that? Just look at the card and do it. Right. But the actual core gameplay is not that complex.
Yeah, definitely. Let us know in the comments if you want to see a Mage Knight playthrough or rules review or even a Mage Knight multiplayer.
I'm always down for playing.
It's gonna be long, but we can definitely do that.
I'm in.
All right, my first expansion here is going to be.
What do you got?
I'm cheating already on my expansion rules. This is an expansion for Anachrony. Which is definitely one of my favorite games. It's number 5 on the list though because it's kind of a cheap expansion. It's actually the Chronosis module.
Which it's a module in an expansion.
It is a modular expansion. Yeah. I think it's in the Fractures of Time expansion if you're looking for the box that it comes in. But what the Chronosis does is that it kind of elevates the AI solo play system to a whole new level. So with the Chronosis, not only is he much more intense and harder to beat, but he'll allow you to plug in any combination of other modules to play against. So previously, you could only play the base game solo. So that was the only thing possible. But with Chronosis, you can mix and match the expansions, and he'll hold in there and fight you on all levels.
So it adds another way to play all of the other expansions as well as the base.
It adds another way to solo from the original solo.
Nice.
But allows you to use the other expansions. So, I mean, as much as I love the other expansions too, I think this makes it, it's like the cherry on top of
Well, it makes all the other expansions that much more usable.
Yeah.
Right? Exactly.
So that's huge right there.
Yeah. So it's a lot of bang for your buck for essentially one board.
That's
in a couple days.
That's good. So you guys both went with something that elevates a solo play. This one is
it's even worse.
It's a little different.
That's our next list.
That's the next one.
That make the game worse.
Yeah.
So my number 5 is King of Tokyo Power Up. King of Tokyo is a game I really enjoy, and that's one of the games that really got me into the hobby once I got into the modern board game hobby. I played King of Tokyo. I really enjoyed it. But I thought, all of these monsters are all the same. They don't really act differently. So I found this Power Up expansion, and it makes each monster in King of Tokyo unique asymmetrical, which is one of the biggest reasons I look for when I go out and spend my money on an expansion box is how can each player be a little bit different on the board rather than kind of being the same, and it adds a little bit of variability to each play. You try and play as a different character. So this expansion adds a deck for each monster in King of Tokyo, and it does two things. One is obviously it gives you different powers, but also when you roll those dice, they're all so random. When you roll hearts, it actually gives you something to do with those heart die rolls that you wouldn't otherwise be able to do if you were in Tokyo. So when you're in Tokyo, you can't heal with those hearts if you play the game. So you're kind of just sitting there and wasting those hearts. But now if you get 3 hearts, you have a reason to go for those hearts, so you can draw a new power up and level up your character, get an always active power or a one-time use power, which is something that I really find enjoyable and kind of brings the game up to the next level. And to Nabil's point, I would never play King of Tokyo without it. It doesn't add too much to the teach. When you're teaching new players, you can just bring out the box and let them know, hey, this is how we play King of Tokyo, and this is one of the things that you can do with hearts as opposed to leaving it out of the box. So King of Tokyo Power Up, my number 5, really enjoyed it.
Was that included in the new Dark Edition?
It was not.
It was not.
It was not.
That's an oversight.
I really like the dark theme. It really makes it cool. The Dark King of Tokyo, I think it adds a new track, which I haven't really looked into, but other than that, it doesn't add the expansion, which again, it is a missed opportunity.
That's too bad.
And I don't think the Power Up is compatible with the new box just because of the card backs they don't match. But you could probably just mix it up.
Especially because the monsters in that game, they look so different, and it's like why shouldn't they should also feel different?
Yeah.
You know.
Oh,
Anyways, okay, so number 4. My number 4 is another one that again I would never play this game without, and it doesn't really add too much to the teach. Just a few more cards and like an extra step in between rounds. So my number 4 is Seven Wonders Leaders. And so with leaders, there's another draft that you do to start the game where everyone gets a certain number of leader cards, and then you get to draft leaders that give you. Some of them give you really powerful one-time uses. Some are really powerful permanent bonuses. But you have to buy them with coins at the start of each age, I believe. Some of them you have to have the Seven Wonders Cities expansion to use as well, but you can easily just leave those out. There's lots and lots of leaders in there that don't need that other expansion, and it just adds another another decision point. Whereas like, I want to use my coins to buy resources from my neighbors, but then no, I can't use all my coins because I need to have those coins to pay for my leader at the start of the next age, and those leaders can be absolutely game changing. Yeah. You can go from not being in the lead, and then this one leader gives you this amazing power in the third age that lets you pull ahead. So
I really like that the expansion as well. Cities is also a nice one to have. Cities might be easier for newer players. So Will and I have spoken about this.
Cities is a more stuff expansion.
More stuff.
It just adds more, but Leaders transforms the game.
I like the Leaders one just a little bit better, just for that reason that it adds that extra little step where you can again become a little bit more unique than your fellow competitors at the table, where you have this unique leader power. Again, sometimes it's just like a one and done, but it can give you that one boost that you need. So I like that, and it really doesn't add too much to the teach.
Yeah, the one thing I will say about leaders is unless you play the game a lot, I find that I'm constantly referencing
that is a problem.
the sheets to be like, okay, what does this leader do? Because the iconography is not immediately obvious as to what power that leader gives you. Yeah. And unfortunately, there's only one reference sheet in the box. So if you're playing with 7 people, then you're constantly passing it around from one person to the next. But it's easy that's easy to overcome.
The second edition, I believe, changes that.
Does it?
Yeah.
Okay. I haven't done the second edition yet.
They give you multiple.
There you go.
So they
problem solved.
Good job to designers listening to feedback on that. Yep. So that helps a little bit, but still the iconography is an issue. You still have to keep looking.
But overall, I would never not play with this expansion.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get that they want to keep it language independent, so they only have to print one set of cards.
Yeah.
And then just put different rule books in the box. But a little bit of wording could have gone a long way to avoid some of that,
Yeah. I mean, it slows the game a little bit, but not to the point where I wouldn't play it.
Yeah.
For sure. All right, my number 4 is for Teotihuacan. It is the late pre-classic period expansion. I know Franz played with this one. Not only does it have more stuff, it has got more technologies. It has alternative base tiles to you that change up how the main kind of areas of the board work. But more importantly, it adds, like Franz said about King Tokyo, it adds player powers. You get a tile that explains kind of what your player power is, but almost even more interestingly is the powers are tied with a negative.
Oh.
Right? So it may say, like, you get this amazing bonus, but guess what? You can never do this thing.
Mm-hmm.
Or you take a penalty every time you do that bonus or something. So you have to try to balance those, the pros and cons of your ability. And it can help kind of guide you to certain strategies. Sometimes you can ignore them entirely, but sometimes it could make a strategy that you hadn't thought about be much more attractive to try. Also, there are player power tiles just for the AI system. So now you can plug that into the solo kind of setup for the game and give the AI its own kind of unique set of powers and things that change kind of the flavor of how the game works when you're playing solo. So now you're playing against slightly different opponents each time, and they play differently each time too.
Nice. That makes the game
cool.
Way more replayable.
Yeah, very cool.
Excellent. Okay, so my number 4 is going to be Lords of Waterdeep: Scoundrels of Skullport.
Ooh, nice.
Now, Lords of Waterdeep is one of my favorite worker placement games. One of the first games, again, that I played when I started the hobby a few years ago, and really, really enjoyed it. But after a few plays, it can get a little bit stale, especially with a lot of not samey. I wouldn't say use samey as the word, but yeah, I mean, there's only so many spots you can go to, only so many buildings you can kind of go through the stack of buildings over the course of 3 or 4 plays. But this one here adds a couple of different modules, and I really enjoy it because you can play with one, both, or you can combine them at the same time, or you can just play with one or the other. So one of them that I really enjoy is the Skullport expansion, which adds really, really powerful worker placement spots. But for having to go there, you have to take a skull, which is a negative point at the end of the game. So it's kind of balancing that. Do I really want this powerful ability or this powerful action? But do I want these skulls on my board? At the end of the game. So am I going to have to give up a bunch of points at the end of the game? So that concept I think has been used in a few games after that, but that one was the first one that really did it, and I think still did it the best. So that's a game that I would always use the expansions, those 2 expansion modules with, one or the other. If I've played with players that have played the game before, I would just throw them both in. You get another location board with the other module as well, so just more worker placement spots that allows you to fulfill bigger contracts, bigger value contracts. So you can, just kind of save up for that one contract and then boom, 40 points, right there with one...
or negative 40 points once the skulls catch up to you at the end.
With the negative. Yes. So it adds a lot new element to the game, which I enjoy. Normally, I don't really go for more stuff expansions. Like I said in the first, in King of Tokyo, I like the asymmetrical power expansions more. But this is one that really does it really well and adds not a lot of teaching time to the game. So there you go. That's my number 4.
I would even explain that Skullport expansion it's like the hot sauce expansion.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it adds some spiciness, but if you eat too much, you're going to get burned.
Yeah. So it's really good. Yeah.
Nice. All right. Well, my number 3, I guess we're on now, right? Is kind of similar to my number 4. But again, it's one that I would not play without. It's Seven Wonders Duel Pantheon.
Ew.
So Seven Wonders Duel is the 2-player version of Seven Wonders, and I actually like it better than the base game.
Same.
I mean, yes, you can only play with 2 people, but I just find it's more streamlined, and it's back and forth, and I love that mechanic where you have a pyramid of cards, some of which you know what they are, some you don't, and then you've got to draft one that isn't touching another card. So there's that element of, I really want that card, but I also don't want to free up the next card for my opponent because they probably want that card, right? So it adds that element of drafting as well. Not that the original game doesn't, but I just find this is a bit more tangible. Anyways, and Pantheon adds god powers to the game. So kind of like leaders, the gods give you like unique powers that you can use in the game. And depending on where they're placed on the board, some gods will be cheaper for you to use versus other ones. And it just adds more things that you can do on your turn. Maybe your opponent took that one card that was the linchpin for your strategy, and otherwise your game would be over. Or you can use this god power. It gives you another option to do. So more stuff, a little bit more decision, larger decision space, but again, not overly complex. I haven't played the second one, Agora, so I don't know what that's like.
I haven't played either of the expansions. So
no?
I need to play
this.
Oh man,
you got to play Pantheon. It's excellent.
Pantheon is good. I would agree with Nabil on that. It does add another thing that you can do on your turn and gives you those unique powers. I haven't played it with my wife yet, and I play with her quite a bit, just the base game, and I felt it added a little bit too much to the complexity for just the two of us. But if I were to play with one of the three of us or someone that plays heavier games, I would always throw that expansion in because it really gives another layer to the game. So I do enjoy the expansion, but it just missed out. I was just looking at my phone; it missed out on the cut of my my list for that reason. Yeah.
Is that compatible with the print and play solo? Because the developers for this at the start of COVID put out an official print and play, like print it out yourself and play solo AI card set that is available on their website.
Interesting.
Yeah. Did you know if it works with the expansion?
I don't know if it works with the expansion. I have played the solo print and play. I did not play the expansion when I did play the solo print and play, so I don't know if the expansion is compatible. I imagine they would have worked something out for. I haven't. That's a good question. Someone look into.
Okay, look into that.
Yeah. Over to you, Will.
All right. My number 3 is for Zaya, and it is the Embers of a Forsaken Star expansion.
Ooh, this is a game that I really want to play because it's very much like Mage Knight.
It is a lot like Mage Knight. It's a huge sandbox, kind of open world space game where you are, a ship, run around the galaxy. You can, take up the law, the rule of the law and chase down bounties and blow them up and claim the bounties for them, or you can go and you can attack friendly merchant ships and getting a bounty on yourself, and then the police ships come after you. It's a very expansive game. Embers of a Forsaken Star adds not only a solo component, but it adds like a ton of new tiles and things to explore. It adds new ship powers, so that now you have a choice between powers whenever you buy a ship, which ones you're going to use. It adds a whole bunch of new event cards and things as well, new special traits that once you kind of like unlock an achievement, kind of like video game style achievements, you now have like a permanent special ability that's assigned to your character as well.
Oh, cool.
And there's also there's this more of everything on top of it. So it's a fairly large expansion, but I don't think I would ever play without it.
Right.
Even with multiplayer, there's just that much more stuff to explore in this huge open world.
Yeah,
nice. It's always nice when an expansion gives you more stuff that you can just slot in and use.
Well, and I should mention, also very importantly, is it adds a market system to the resources in the game.
Okay.
So you can no longer luck out by getting like a couple of neighboring planets that want to trade each other's goods and then just farm points between them. Now there's kind of like a market, so that eventually the goods are going to kind of run out and you're going to have to go and like get goods from a different planet and bring them over and like create a cycle. So
nice.
Interesting.
It does balance the game as well.
Cool. All right, my number 3 again, another expansion that adds variable player powers to the game, and it's one of my favorite games of all time. Is Clank, and the expansion is called Clank Adventuring Party, and that's pretty much what the game does. Is it adds 5 new player decks. So now that when you start the game, and again it's compatible with each board of Clank that you play with. So I think the base Clank has 3 or 4 expansion boards now that you can play with, and this expansion is compatible with I believe all of them. And so instead of starting with the same 10 cards as your starting deck, now it adds a variable deck. So I think a couple of the cards in the deck are unique, and it gives you a unique player ability that one of the cards in your deck triggers. So now that you're starting the game, you have a little bit of a different strategy. You're different than all the other players. You're not making your deck unique as you go through the game. You actually start with a different hand of cards right at the beginning, which I really, really enjoy. And I'm excited to kind of play as all of the characters and kind of see what you can do with as each of them when you go into the game. So this is again another game, an expansion that I would never play the game without from now on. Now that I have it. So anytime I play the game, I'll say, okay, here's one of the 5 characters you can be. Which one would you like to be? When I'm teaching a new player. So, Clank Adventuring Party, my number 3.
Nice.
Oh, welcome back to Cardboard Minute. So we had a loss of footage. For some reason, the camera had stopped halfway through, even though there was tons of memory left, and the battery, there was no battery. It was plugged in. But whatever it happened, so we are going to just pick up again where we left off from the video. It probably won't be quite as amusing as our lost footage, but I mean, whatever. We saw.
We'll do our best.
So we're going to continue from our top 2 with Nabil. Go ahead.
All right. So my number 2 is another one that I would probably choose to never not play with. It's for one of my favorite games of all time. It's Role Player Monsters and Minions. So if you haven't played Role Player, I highly recommend doing it. Play it. It's excellent. It's basically you're trying to create a D&D character using dice and dice mitigation. So you take a player board, you take a backstory, you take a class, you take an alignment card, and then you use all those, and you're rolling dice and picking cards from a market and picking dice from a market as well, and then placing those dice in one of 6 stats, so like strength, dexterity, intelligence, charisma, constitution. And then based on which stat you put the die into, you get to take an action. And so the actions are where you can mitigate the dice you've already placed. So it's a lot of fun. It's very thinky, but I absolutely love it. And Monsters and Minions, it adds another thing you can do. Instead of buying a card from the market, you can fight a monster. Fight a minion. Because at the end of the game, once you've created your character, you're going to go up against the boss. There's many bosses you can go up against. By fighting the boss's minions, you get to look at the modifications that will be made when you're fighting the boss. So there's like an obstacle you have to overcome, there's a location you're going to fight in, and there's a third modifier, I can't remember the name. But each time you fight a minion, you get to look at one of those modifications, so you can plan ahead. So if the monster is going to make you discard all of your 6s you rolled or something like that, you can kind of plan your strategy around that a little bit. So it's nice to be able to do something with the character you created, as opposed to just having this cool character and being like, okay,
and then
game's over.
Yeah, that's
right?
over.
I know Role Player Adventures that just came out this year, this month actually. Yeah. It does that, so you can take your character you create in Role Player and then play through a whole series of adventures, which apparently is pretty cool.
I think you can convert it into a D&D character.
Yeah, you can also convert it into a D&D character
if you want.
If you play D&D. So you can do something with the character, but yeah, I think it just adds it adds more dice. It adds little experience cubes you can use to spend on certain things. It adds more cards from the market, and it just adds another level of more things to do on your turn, which is always fun.
Definitely. All right, my number 2 is the Valhalla expansion for Champions of Midgard. Valhalla, for me, has elevated Champions of Midgard up to the highest tiers of gaming for me. It's traditionally my dice rolling is not always the best. I don't know quite what's wrong there, but and if you roll badly in combat in Midgard, all the troops, all the Vikings you've taken multiple rounds sometimes to accumulate and gather from around the villages, just poof, they're gone, and it's a huge sting and even potential loss of the game just because you roll badly.
I've had several games with Champions of Midgard where I've gone on a sea voyage to fight this monster. I've got all my warriors, and then boom, you fight the Kraken on the way.
Dice rolls don't go your way.
You lose some dice that way, and then you fight the monster. You still have just enough warriors, but then you roll the dice, and they're all blanked, and boom, they're all dead.
Yeah, you expect to lose some, but not all of them. So the Valhalla expansion essentially gives you a ghostly token to replace the guy that died, which you can then use in Valhalla for other bonuses. And it means that even if you fail badly, you still get at least something in return, but you can even plan around that. You can essentially throw your guys to their doom because you want them in Valhalla for some additional bonuses. So it for me, adds that extra level of thinking that makes it a little more complicated, but just so much more satisfying.
Yeah.
And if you roll badly, like I often do, it's not as punishing.
Yeah.
I would agree with that, and I'll comment more on that in just a second.
Spoilers.
Spoiler warning. My number 2 is actually an overlap with something that's already just been said a couple minutes ago with Nabil. So my number 2 is Monsters and Minions for Role Player. I agree. I love Role Player a lot. It's a fantastic game, but at the end you're kind of left a little bit wanting a little bit more to do with your character. And so for someone like me, I don't play D&D. It's cool to create that character, so to get that experience, but then you're not actually having to do combat or actually use the skills that you've customized for that character. So Monsters and Minions kind of takes that and makes it an essential expansion for me, because now you can actually do combat, as Nabil mentioned, with those minions along the way to get XP cubes and to help prepare you for the battle against the final monster. Which are, by the way, are very cool in themselves. They're all unique, and they have different difficulties and things that you have to prepare against. So you have the Kraken, you have the Chimera, you have all these cool monsters that you can prepare for. So while you're preparing for them, you're battling that monster's minions, and you're getting those XP. So it gives you something else to do on your turn. But it's also like that extra element of you're going into combat. So I would never not play without it. Maybe for a new player, I would keep it out. But even then, it's not a hard thing to add. So I might just throw it in because it does add a lot of fun to the game for me personally. So highly recommend Monsters and Minions for Role Player.
All right, Nabil, what's number one?
So my number one is also a crossover with Will. My number one is Champions of Midgard Valhalla. This is 100% an essential expansion. Of the two that are out there, I'd say you can probably skip Dark Mountains, but
Dark Mountains is still good.
It's good in its own, but I find that when I play with Dark Mountains, I don't use those actions as much as I feel like would warrant buying an expansion. And it adds a fifth player, but I'm not sure that I'd want to play with five.
Yeah.
Depending on who's playing, it just makes the game quite long. But Valhalla it's essential. Like, I would never not play with it. And it not only does it add that element of maybe you want your warriors to die, so you can use those tokens to fight one of the epic monsters in Valhalla, but it also adds more variability to your Jarl. So when you pick a character to play as, you've already got your one unique power, but Valhalla also adds these leader dice that you have during every combat, and it adds another unique leader power that you add to your board. So when you roll your leader die, if you get a specific face on that die, you can activate your leader power, which can be quite powerful. Or like if your Jarl doesn't have that good of a base power, the leader power balances that out and makes him really, really good. And vice versa as well, so nobody feels overpowered. It also adds the pink Berserker dice, so it's another type of warrior, which are like, if you get, they're awesome to get. Like,
they're pink because they're naked.
So they're going to battle, no armor.
They also die first.
Just 2 axes, and they have to die first when you use them. So that's a really neat mechanic, and it just adds more stuff, some more runes, some more destinies, a couple more Draugr, a couple more trolls, which is easy to slot in. There's lots there, and for not a huge price. So it's really good value.
It's very, very affordable for what you get in the box. Some expansions can be as much as the base game.
Yeah.
Like my next one, my number one, is the Terra Incognita expansion for Civilization and New Dawn. The box is as big as the base game. It costs about as much as the base game. But it brings Civilization and New Dawn from what was a decent, still recommendable Civilization style game, or 4X game, 3X technically, and it elevates it to like a full 10, perfect score in my books. It adds just so much more. First of all, it does reintroduce the missing X, the exploration, because the map starts much more smaller and constrained, but you can explore outwards and discover new lands, and you have a bit of control over how those lands get built as well. It brings in a much more combat focus as well, so that before, combat was kind of lackluster and there wasn't a lot of strategy involved. It was just kind of poking at each other from far away. But now you actually have armies that move across the board, and you have to watch out for and prepare for. There are forts to take over, and a whole slew of new in-game objectives, some of them even including combat, just to change up the game. New wonders, new everything. Governments that you can help kind of plan ahead a little more and steer your strategy for a little while. And also, most importantly, it brings in unique technologies for each of the different faction countries, the different factions you can start with, so that not only you also feel different while you are upgrading your different technologies. You'll have moments where you look across the board and say, what did you just do?
Yeah.
Like, I can't do that. That's awesome. There's definitely some cool things, and it really it feels even more like the Civilization video games.
Yes, exactly.
Than even originally it was.
Yeah.
Well, still not being a ridiculously long play length either.
Yeah. And those things that Terra Incognita adds, like if you've played any of the Civilization video games in the past, like the things that Terra Incognita adds, you would almost expect to be in a game with the name Civilization, My Civilization. Like the map exploration, the combat, the unique technologies, the governments. Those are all integral parts of the video game. So it does definitely elevate the base game.
Yeah, I hadn't played the game before, and the first time we played it, we'll introduce the expansion right in with the base game. So I don't know what it's like to play without it, and I actually, quite frankly, couldn't see the game without that expansion because I enjoyed it a great deal, and I think I've commented before, the variability between the players is something I tremendously enjoy. So having that element brought into the game with the expansion, it really elevated it for me.
Your list of top 10 top 5 expansions kind of
a lot of player powers.
A lot of player powers. It's a common theme.
Player powers.
Common theme.
Yeah, they're pretty cool.
It's always good. It's always awesome.
Yeah. And I will say there is a solo print and play for Civilization New Dawn that the developers put out. Again, also at the start of COVID, much like the Seven Wonders Duel, similar idea. And then the Board Game Geek community has expanded that to include the expansion. So check it out if you're looking for something to play solo. It has become my favorite Civilization style game. Yeah. And then maybe we'll compare Civilization games at a different time or something.
I have some thoughts on that.
So let us know in the description if you or in the comments if you want us to do some Civ games. We could do solos or live playthroughs, multiplayer playthroughs. Let us know.
All right, number 1, and it is a 3-way crossover. Will had it at number 2. Nabil,
well deserved too.
Oh, yeah. Nabil had it at number 1, and it is my number 1 as well. Champions of Midgard Valhalla. I'm a little biased, I must say. Champions of Midgard is my number 1 all-time favorite game. I enjoy it tremendously. It overlaps a number of mechanisms in board games that I enjoy. It has variable powers to begin with in the base game, which is cool. So you can play as a different Jarl. There's set collection, there's dice rolling, worker placement, and it's Viking themed, which is one of my favorite themes in board games, is Vikings. So I enjoy Champions of Midgard as it is without the expansion. That being said, adding Valhalla takes it from a 10 out of 10 to an 11 out of 10 for me, just with what you can do with those dice after they're gone into Valhalla, right? So once they die in battle, in combat, I think it's been mentioned, your dice are gone, so it can put you in an awkward position if you've kind of been building up for that one battle, and then dice don't go your way, as oftentimes they don't for Will. Make fun of him for that, for dice not cooperating with him, but now you can actually plan to lose in battle, even if you want, to make use of those tokens to combat other monsters in the afterlife, which is really neat, or buy those blessings, which you can actually use to your benefit. So having people sent into battle, now you can customize the people that you want to send into battle because you get those specific tokens. So now you're doing a little bit more planning in terms of which dice you want to send into combat. So adds another layer, and it's a phenomenal experience with that expansion. The Dark Mountains, yes, it is an excellent expansion. It's more of a more stuff expansion where you're adding that extra workers placement spot with the mountains, the trolls in the mountains.
It does add a bunch of monsters with unique conditions and abilities, which does make it interesting, but it's not as necessary.
But
it's not as necessary.
If you're limited to buying one of the 2 expansions,
that's the one you would go with, is Valhalla.
Valhalla is the one you go with. 100%.
So and again, price point is compared to other expansions where you don't get as much stuff and their price a great deal higher. Valhalla is a great bang for your buck. So number 1 of all time, my favorite expansion. I would always throw it in the box and play it even with new players sometimes. It does add a little bit more complexity to the game, but the reward that you get for the enjoyment factor is much, much higher. So Champions of Midgard Valhalla.
Well, thanks for the list, guys. Lots of great recommendations. I think I did notice a trend that there's anything that adds unique player powers is usually highly sought after.
Oh, yeah.
And expansions that just add a 5th player are usually frowned upon. You know, I
Depends on the
think
game, but yeah.
I think generally making the game longer with more people is not always the best choice.
Yeah.
I would agree with the 5th player component is, you know, only essential if your group is only at 5 and you only ever play the game at 5 and you can't bring out the game unless you have the 5th player. However, it's typically not balanced if the game doesn't come with the 5th player in the base box, so it kind of adds that length and complexity to a game. So you'd rather play a 5-player game out of the box, you know. So those 5th player expansions, I'm sometimes
Also,
iffy on.
like some games are just by their nature prone to analysis paralysis.
Yeah.
Like Civ games,
worse.
for example. Like Civ games, you expect to be paralyzed, and when you're analyzing and parsing out every little aspect of your turn, that's normal. But if you're playing with 5 people, like that 2.5-hour game becomes a 4.5-hour game, 4-hour game. You know, and that's
it can add exponentially more time
it can.
than you would think.
I mean, if you like those kinds of big, long, epic games, then like amazing, go for it. But we like to get multiple games in, if we can, whenever we can. So.
Our game sessions,
Yeah.
for sure. And the other expansions are the more stuff expansions. So if you really like the game and you've played it out enough, a bunch, then you might want to get that expansion down the road when you've exhausted the variability of the base game, and then you want to add more stuff to bring new life into the game. So those expansions are good maybe down the road.
That can be a tough sell sometimes because like at that point you have to weigh, do I want more for a game I already love or do I want a whole new game and have twice as much fun instead of
for learning a whole new game. So I'm usually in the latter camp.
Same. I'm also in the latter camp where I like to buy a whole new game as opposed to investing in just more stuff, and that brings up another type of expansion, which is the upgraded components expansions, which we didn't even mention any of them in our list.
I think those are
components can get expensive.
They can get super expensive. I love upgraded components, like going from like the little cardboard flat ones to nice chunky wooden ones or plastic ones. Like it's always great, but spending like
expensive
$50 sometimes on just tokens when you can buy 1 or 2 games for that much.
Dune Imperium is an example for that one.
Yeah,
right?
Dice Hospital, like you can buy like big
newest,
plastic ambulances to put your patients into, which are super cool.
Yeah.
But do you need them? No. Absolutely not.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like you said, the price of it. I think like a lot of gamers, it's just you shouldn't even look at that unless. Either you have just a few games that you play regularly and you love them, go nuts, right? Upgrade them like crazy. But if you're in a boat where we are, where we're buying too many games and cycle games and sell games, then spending a ton of money on something that's just going to sit in a box and never actually come out doesn't make sense.
Unless you're just that close to free shipping, and it's the only thing you want.
Right. Now, I will one other type of expansion that I will ask you guys about because I don't actually own any is the boards as a mat. Right?
Oh, I see.
The mat expansion.
The neoprene mat.
What do you guys think about that?
I mean,
because I've seen like other YouTubers adore player mats, other ones getting rid of them.
I totally get why people love them. Like, if you have a game that's really card heavy and you have a lot of cards on the board, it's much easier to pick up and manage those cards without damaging them on a neoprene mat, as opposed to a cardboard board.
But I would rather have just one surface for everything.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. If it adds the expansion boards in the neoprene mat, so I've seen that being done for Champions of Midgard actually, for Raiders of the North Sea, where there's 2 expansion boxes and you're adding a bunch of boards around the map, and the neoprene mat just kind of lays everything out at once. You don't have to worry about that.
But then what do you do with it?
And then
if it doesn't fit in the box,
you got to roll it up and put it
where you store it. What do you do with it?
There are some games that I think like those types of mats are super helpful. So like certain deck builders, for example.
Yeah, some card games.
If you have a bunch of decks in front of you on the table, all having the same back, if you don't have a player mat, you've got to keep track of which deck is which. So, for example, there's a game that I own that I backed the second printing of on Kickstarter. It was Apex, the Theropod deck building game. Mm-hmm. When the first edition came out, there was no board, there was no mat. It was just all decks with the same back, and you organize them however you want on the table. But then you got to remember which one is which.
Oh,
and there are several different piles that you have to keep track of. You've got your unique species deck, you've got the market of mutations, you've got all kinds of stuff, and it was hard to keep track of. That was one of the major complaints. But then when they did the Kickstarter, they made like a full player boards and a full player mat and everything.
Yeah, I agree. I can't think of too many expansions that add neoprene mat. I think it's the mat is just it's an add-on, I guess, more than an expansion. So I wouldn't categorize that as a full-blown expansion, but it is something you're spending money on after you've bought the base game. So from that standpoint, it is kind of an expansion. But yeah, those are my thoughts on those mats. But yeah, they're nice to have, but not essential.
Yeah. Again, it comes down to like, do you want to spend your money on a mat or do you want to spend your money on a new game? That's what it comes down to for me every time.
That's the big choice, yeah.
Right? And I usually side on new game.
New games.
New games.
Play more games.
Play more
Much
games.
to the chagrin of my fiance. It was like, more games?
More shells.
More shells.
Yeah,
Although
more games.
expansions, sometimes you can store them in the box.
Exactly.
They don't take up space on the shelf.
That's a good point.
We also didn't talk about that. If the expansion will not fit in the box, will you be less likely to buy it?
That's interesting.
If you now have to have 2 boxes on the shelf.
Depends on how big the expansion box is.
Yeah.
If it's super thin and I can just slot it in on top of the base game box,
Yeah.
fine. But if it's the size of the actual base game itself, then that's...
Or if it doubles the amount of content, then maybe it's worth having.
Yeah.
It's a good debate to have. I don't have too many that don't fit in the base box. I don't have Smartphone Inc., which has another board and it doesn't fit in the base box because you can't remove the insert because you're actually using the insert of the base game. Anyway, so certain games, yeah.
Sometimes you can squeeze. Like,
Sometimes you can squeeze it in.
I have Wildlands of all maps and the Ancients expansion all in one box,
Very
but
cool.
it is like
That's awesome.
jam packed.
And it's like off.
And it weighs. No, it's not off. It's, it's closed, but the thing weighs.
Just take a look.
It weighs a ton. It is like a solid brick of cardboard
Yeah.
afterwards. So.
Yeah, we could talk about this for.
Oh yeah. Well, we'll leave it at that. Anyways, hope you guys enjoyed our top 5 list of expansions. You'll see us back some other time. Thanks again for watching. Please like and subscribe. Let us know what your favorite expansions are. If you have any thoughts on some of our discussion over, what makes a good expansion or why.
And if you disagree with us, you're obviously wrong.
Please, let us or let us know that we're wrong, and we'll debate you on that, and that would be fine too. So, anyways, enjoy playing games with friends, and we'll see you later.
Everyone.